If someone had told me one dance could turn a headline into a heartbeat, I wouldn't have believed them. It wasn't the champagne in her glass, or the string quartet's gentle rendition of some old romantic classic that made her feel sick to her stomach. It was the unbearable beauty of other people's joy. The way couples swayed under chandeliers, glowing and flawless in their evening wear, as if the world were soft, easy, made only for them. From her position in the corner of the ballroom, arms folded across the front of her black satin gown, the billionaire watched them all, motionless, unreachable, glass in hand, but untouched. No one looked in her direction. They never did. Not really. They admired her. They spoke her name with a mix of awe and calculation. They wanted favors, capital, entree, never closeness, never touch, never presence, and certainly never love. Her days were a litany of spreadsheets, sealed rooms, headlines, inheritance, power, an empire, vast and gleaming, with no one to share it. Her parents were long gone. Her brother, gone longer. The board respected her. Her employees feared her. The world envied her. And yet, on her own birthday, she was hosting a black-tie gala in her own mansion, marking a milestone she hadn't even wanted to meet. 35, single, cold, alone. She smoothed her cuff and pretended indifference as another slow song began. The crowd thinned toward the center of the floor. Lights lowered, and a woman in a red dress laughed so uninhibited it cut straight through her. She envied that sound, that freedom, that softness. She couldn't recall the last time she had laughed like that, or danced, or been touched without it becoming a transaction. She felt the beginnings of a headache and considered disappearing into the corridor, escaping her own party unnoticed. But just as she turned to leave, a voice, low, feminine, edged with something teasing and intimate, slipped past her defenses like a whisper meant only for her. "You deserve a first dance, too." She froze. Her breath caught in her throat. The voice was behind her, closer than it should be. Her heart lurched against her ribs, unfamiliar and startled, like a locked door thrown open by wind. Slowly, cautiously, she turned and saw her. A stranger, and yet not. The woman was beautiful in a way that wasn't careful. Wild hair, freckles across her collarbone, a gown the color of moonlight. No jewelry except a single ring on her thumb. Her lips were curved in a subtle, knowing smile. She was watching her, really watching her. No calculation, no agenda, just a quiet kind of curiosity, as if she had no idea who she was. Or maybe knew exactly who she was, but didn't care. "Excuse me," the billionaire managed, though her voice came out uneven, not as clipped as she intended. "I said," the woman stepped forward just enough to bridge the space between them. "You deserve a first dance, too. Everyone else is having theirs." The billionaire blinked. She couldn't remember the last time someone had spoken to her like that, without hesitation or flattery. "I don't dance," she said, "or at least not at my own parties." "That's tragic," the woman replied, eyes dancing, "because you look like you've been waiting for someone to ask you all night. You're not from here." It wasn't a question. "I'm not from anywhere," the woman said, "but I go where the music is." That made her smile, just barely, a twitch of something she hadn't felt in months. The woman extended her hand, palm up. "Come on, no one's watching, and if they are, let them." Her first instinct was to refuse, to pull back into the safety of her silence and solitude. But her hand was already moving against her better judgment, against every boundary she'd built. Her fingers touched the other woman's, and the contact was electric, real, warm, present, as if she'd been underwater her whole life and someone had finally cracked the surface. The ballroom was still full of dancing bodies, full of noise and elegance and superficial perfection. But in that moment, as the stranger led her gently toward the edge of the dance floor, everything else melted away. No one else mattered, only the feel of that hand in hers, only the possibility in those eyes, only the voice that had whispered, "You deserve a first dance, too." And for the first time in years, the billionaire wondered if maybe she did. She hadn't touched a woman in years. Not like this. Not slowly, deliberately, with no contract, no agenda, no transactional power imbalance. Just skin on skin, just music and breath. The woman's hand fit perfectly into hers, warm, calloused in a way that surprised her. Like someone who worked with her hands. Not soft in the polished, perfect way of socialites, but soft where it mattered, real, grounded. Her other hand settled gently at the billionaire's waist, and she stiffened instinctively. Too used to control, too unfamiliar with surrender. The stranger noticed. Of course she did. And instead of pulling her closer, she gave her space. A little space. Just enough to let her breathe. Just enough to tell her without a word, I won't push you. You come to me. And God. That made her want to close the distance. She hadn't realized how starved she was for that kind of patience. For someone who didn't demand, didn't take, but simply waited. The music shifted into a slower melody, a more intimate rhythm, and they began to move together. Awkward at first, not quite in sync. The billionaire too stiff, too conscious of herself, but the woman was easy, fluid. Her steps were more suggestion than instruction. She led without pressure. She smiled with her eyes. She didn't say anything else, just let the silence speak. It was unnerving, disarming, beautiful. You're not afraid of me, the billionaire said softly, almost more to herself than to the woman. Should I be? Most people are. That sounds lonely. It was, but she didn't say it. She just swallowed hard and glanced around them. No one seemed to notice or care that the most powerful woman in the city was dancing with a stranger at her own gala. Or maybe they noticed, but no one dared interrupt. You're different, she murmured. You say that like it's a bad thing. It's not. It's just confusing. The woman's gaze softened. So is desire. So is honesty. So is doing something for no reason other than it feels right. The billionaire didn't know what to say to that. She couldn't remember the last time she did something just because it felt right. Her entire existence had been structured, calculated, risk-managed. But this felt like jumping from a cliff with no parachute. And terrifying as it was, it also felt exhilarating. You never told me your name, she said, voice steadier now. No, I didn't. The woman's smile widened. Do you want it? Yes. The pause. A moment so charged it stole the air from her lungs. Then you first, the woman said. I want to hear your real name. Not the name they put on buildings. Not the name they whisper in boardrooms. Yours. That stopped her cold, because she couldn't remember the last time someone asked her for that. Not her reputation. Not her empire. Not her power. Just her. She looked down uncertain, and then quietly gave it. Her real name. The one no one used anymore. The one that still made her feel like a girl. Not an empire. The woman whispered her own name in return, like a secret, like a gift. The moment held, the music slowed, and suddenly the billionaire realized they weren't dancing anymore. They were just standing there, hands still touching, breath mingling, lost in a bubble of something neither of them dared to name. Why did you come here tonight? She asked, her voice barely a breath. The woman's reply was simple, honest, devastating. I came to see if you still remembered how to feel. And with that, she slipped her hand from the billionaire's, turned, and disappeared into the crowd, leaving only the echo of her voice, the ghost of her warmth, and the pounding of a heart that hadn't been touched in years. Alexandra Sterling wasn't the kind of woman who lost control. She didn't stammer, didn't hesitate, didn't let anyone get close enough to shake her. But now, alone in her private suite on the second floor of her mansion, the echo of that stranger's voice still wrapped around her like a noose made of silk. I came to see if you still remembered how to feel. The words had been soft, but they hit like a blow to the chest. She had stood there for nearly 10 full minutes after Lark vanished, unmoving, frozen between the music and the moment. And now, hours later, long after the last guest had left and the staff had retreated to their quarters. Alexandra sat barefoot on the edge of her velvet chaise lounge, staring at the glass of champagne she'd never touched. Her gown felt too tight now, her skin too exposed. Her mind refused to shut up. Who the hell was that woman? And how had she unraveled her with a single dance, a single question, a single look? Alexandra had been adored, feared, envied. She'd been kissed in public by politicians and courted by us who only wanted her name on their arm. But no one had ever looked at her like Lark Wilder did. Like they were seeing through every layer down to the raw truth of her. Like she wasn't just a legend, but a person. A lonely, guarded, fragile person pretending to be a fortress. She exhaled sharply, set down the untouched glass, and stood pacing. She should have asked for a number, a last name, something. But of course, she hadn't. Of course, Lark had slipped away like a ghost. Like a secret she wasn't meant to keep. And yet, she couldn't stop hoping she'd see her again. The thought made her furious. She had a merger to finalize in 48 hours, a board meeting to prepare, an empire to run. She didn't have time to fantasize about a stranger with eyes like moonlight and a voice. That made her chest ache. But when she went to bed that night, late, tense, restless, she dreamed of fingers laced with hers, of freckles on collarbones, of being told she deserves something. Not earned, not negotiated, deserved. The next morning, Alexandra woke early as always. She was at her desk before the sun rose, black coffee in hand, sharp suit already pressed and waiting. But something in her felt unsettled, like a wire pulled too tight. She couldn't focus, couldn't lock in. By noon, she had rewritten the same paragraph of a statement 5 times and snapped at her assistant twice, for mistakes that weren't hers. "Cancel the rest of my meetings," she said, finally standing abruptly. "I need air. Do you want the car, Miss Sterling?" No, she needed to walk. Needed to get out of the marble and glass and steel that defined her every day. And for some reason, she couldn't explain. Her feet didn't take her to the office or the gym or the private rooftop she usually hid in. When the pressure got too loud, no, her feet took her to the old part of the city, to a street of cafes and bookshops she hadn't walked in over a decade. She didn't even know what she was looking for until she saw her, Lark, across the street, sitting at a tiny round table outside a bookstore, wearing a simple white shirt, sleeves rolled up, a book in one hand and coffee in the other. Like she belonged to that world, like she belonged to the sky. Alexandra's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't possible. She didn't believe in coincidence. But there she was, as if she'd been waiting. She didn't look surprised when she saw Alexandra. In fact, she looked amused, like she'd known this would happen, like it was inevitable. Alexandra hesitated, heart thundering. She should walk away. She should retreat. But her feet betrayed her again. They crossed the street, closed the distance, brought her face to face with the woman who had taken her apart with a single dance. "You?" she said, and her voice was lower than she meant. "Me?" Lark replied, setting the book down. "You didn't say goodbye. You didn't ask me to stay. Is that what it takes sometimes?" Lark looked up at her, sun in her eyes, smile gentle but unreadable. "Are you asking now?" Alexandra didn't answer. Not directly. She pulled out the chair across from her and sat at a. "I don't know what this is." "Good. That means it's not a game. I don't have time for this. And yet here you are." Silence. Tight. Electric. Alexandra exhaled. "You're impossible. You're intrigued. Don't get ahead of yourself." Too late. Lark leaned back, sipping her coffee, like she had all the time in the world, like she knew exactly what she was doing. And Alexandra, for the first time in years, had no script, no strategy, no power to control what was happening, only the pull of a woman she barely knew but couldn't stay away from. Alexandra hadn't meant to stay. She hadn't meant to sit at that table or order a coffee or spend 45 uninterrupted minutes across from Lark Wilder listening to her talk. About book cities she lived in the strange art of disappearing and reappearing on her own terms. But she had stayed, and now they were walking side by side through the narrow alleyways behind the old theater district, their arms barely brushing, their shadows flickering together in the late afternoon sun. So, you just wonder, hey, if you're enjoying this story, go ahead and drop a like to help us grow even more. And let me know in the comments, on a scale from 0 to 10, what score would you give this story so far? Your feedback makes all the difference. Alexandra asked, trying to sound unimpressed, but her voice was softer than usual. From one place to the next. I don't wander, Lark said. I move toward whatever feels alive, and when it stops feeling alive, I leave. You make that sound romantic. It is, Lark replied. If you're not afraid of feeling lost every now and then. Alexandra glanced at her. The way Lark moved was unlike anything she'd known. Unhurried, unbothered, and yet totally present. She didn't walk like she had somewhere to be. She walked like she belonged everywhere. And you? Lark asked what he moved toward. Power, control, results. That's not what I meant. I know. Silence stretched between them. But it wasn't empty. It pulsed with everything unsaid. With everything neither of them had the courage to name. They passed a mural, sunflowers bursting across brick, and Lark paused in front of it, turning to face her. You haven't asked me anything real. And what would a real question sound like? Ask me why I came to your party. Alexandra exhaled slowly. You already told me. You wanted to see if I could still feel. That's not the full truth. No. Lark stepped closer. I came because I'd heard stories about the cold, unreachable Alexandra Sterling. About the woman who built an empire and then locked herself inside it. Alexandra's spine straightened, reflexively defensive. I didn't lock myself in. You did, Lark interrupted gently. And I wanted to see if anyone remembered the way out. The words hit harder than Alexandra expected because they weren't cruel. They were quiet, observant, painfully accurate. She looked away. You know nothing about me. That's the thing, Lark said. I think I do. Not everything, but enough to know that you've been walking through life like it's a battlefield. And I'm just wondering when you'll realize no one's shooting anymore. Alexandra's throat tightened. She hated that this stranger could see her. Not just the version in the magazines. Not just the legend, but her. She should have left 10 minutes ago, but her feet wouldn't move. Lark reached into her bag and pulled out a worn paperback. Here, she said, offering it. I marked a page. I think you need it. Alexandra took it without thinking. Their fingers brushed, and there it was again, that low electric hum under her skin. She looked down at the book, The Myth of Surrender. She opened it, eyes falling immediately on the underlined line. Some people think falling in love is like stepping into fire. Others know it's like walking into a room you've spent your whole life avoiding, and finally realizing it's filled with light. Alexandra swallowed hard. You think I'm avoiding something? I think you're starving for something you won't name. And you think you're the one to name it? No. Lark smiled. I think you are. I just want to be there when you do. For a long time, neither of them moved. Then Alexandra said, This isn't a game to me. Good. I don't play games. You're dangerous. Only if you lie to yourself. Alexandra held her gaze. I don't lie. Then prove it. Lark stepped closer, just close enough to feel the warmth of her. Let me walk you home. Alexandra hesitated. Everything in her told her to say no, to retreat, to regain control. But her body was already turning, her lips already forming the one word she hadn't let herself say in years. Yes. And as they walked side by side through the city streets, closer now, something unspoken blooming between them. Alexandra knew this wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time in a long time, it might be worth it. Alexandra hadn't invited anyone into her home in over 2 years. Not without clearance, not without a reason. Yet somehow, before she could trace the steps that led there, she was back in her penthouse with Lark. No security, no cameras, just the two of them in a space built for silence, not closeness. Floor-to-ceiling windows spilled the city's glow across black marble. The fireplace breathed a low, embered light. Lark moved slowly through the room, touching nothing, taking in everything. "You live like a queen," she murmured, not envious, observational. "No clutter, no softness, no sign of life." "I like order," Alexandra said. "Rigid control, you mean?" Lark turned to face her. "Even when it's choking you?" Alexandra didn't answer. She crossed to the bar and poured a whiskey. She didn't offer one. When she looked back, Lark watched her with that same unreadable look, part challenge, part concern, part want. "You don't let people in," Lark said. "Not a question." "That's not true. Name one person who stood in this room and made you feel less alone." Silence. "Then you," Alexandra said, the word escaping before she could stop it. Lark's head tipped, surprised, not smug. "Is that why you brought me here?" "I don't know why I brought you here. Liar." Alexandra's jaw went tight. "Don't call me that. Then stop lying to yourself." A slow step forward. "You feel something. You're just terrified of what it'll cost you because I don't know you. So ask." Alexandra's fingers tightened around the glass. "This isn't how I do things." "Good," Lark said, closing the distance. "Because how you do things has hollowed you out. Truth lands the way it always does, too fast, too deep." Alexandra tried to look away. Lark's hand lifted, touched her cheek, gentle. No demand, fingertips at her jaw. Feather-light and impossibly steadying. Alexandra's breath caught. She didn't move, couldn't. "I should tell you to leave," she whispered. "Then do it." She didn't. Her hand rose, cautious, unsure, and found Lark's wrist. "Just contact. Enough." The air shifted, heavier, charged. Alexandra really looked, freckles, green eyes that didn't flinch, lips parted like they were waiting. She stepped in the smallest measure, enough for their breath to mingle, enough to catch the warm, earthy unfamiliar of Lark's skin. "I don't know how to do this," she said. "Then don't do it perfectly. Just be here." Lark's voice was soft, nearly a whisper. Alexandra closed her eyes, a heartbeat, and let the quiet hold her. When she opened them, she didn't think. She leaned in. Their mouths brushed. Not a kiss. Not yet. Just the ghost of one. A possibility. Lark didn't push, didn't deepen it. She just stayed close, letting Alexandra decide. And that choice, that trust, cracked something wide open. Alexandra kissed her, really kissed her. And it wasn't delicate. It was raw, uncertain, unpracticed. A woman who hadn't allowed herself this kind of hunger in far too long. Lark responded slowly, easing into it, guiding without dominating until their bodies met. And Alexandra's hands found her waist, pulled her closer, held on like she didn't trust herself to let go. When they parted, both breathless, foreheads touching, Lark smiled. "See, still alive." Alexandra's throat tightened. "I don't want to fall." "Maybe you don't need to." Lark's hand slid down to hers, fingers interlacing. "Maybe you just need to let someone stand beside you." Alexandra didn't speak. Couldn't. But for the first time, she didn't pull away. The silence after the kiss wasn't awkward. It was electric. Alexandra stood still, hands still on Lark's waist, trying to catch her breath, trying to remember who she was before she tasted her. The city glowed beyond the windows, indifferent to what had just unraveled inside the penthouse. But inside Alexandra's chest, chaos. Not the kind that screamed, the kind that pulsed quietly under her ribs, the kind that changed everything. Lark didn't speak. She didn't smile. She just looked at her with eyes that saw too much and still didn't flinch. "You okay?" she asked eventually, voice low, as if not to break the spell. Alexandra nodded, but her throat was tight. She let go of Lark slowly, as if afraid that releasing her might make everything feel like a dream. She turned, took 2 steps back, picked up her whiskey, her old defense, and stared out the window. I don't do this, she said after a moment. I don't let people in like this. I know. Lark's voice came from behind her, calm, patient. And still you did. That doesn't mean I know what I'm doing. No one does. I should feel ashamed or out of control. I don't. Good. Alexandra turned to look at her. Lark was standing in the center of the room like she belonged there, not as a guest, but as someone who didn't need permission. Someone who existed entirely on her own terms. It terrified Alexandra, and yet, she wanted her closer. You confuse me, she whispered. Lark stepped forward. I think I'm supposed to. You know who I am. What people say about me. I don't care what they say. I care what you say. That landed deep. Too deep. Alexandra set the glass down again, crossed her arms over her chest like armor. I've built my entire life on being untouchable, being safe. And has that made you happy? It's made me powerful, but not loved. Silence. Brutal, honest silence. Alexandra didn't know how to respond to that. Lark took another step, closing the space between them again. I'm not asking you for a relationship. I'm not asking for promises. I just want you to admit something. What? That you wanted that kiss. Alexandra's eyes flashed. Not with anger, with fear, but she didn't lie. Yes, and that you want more. I don't know what I want. Then let's figure it out slowly together. Lark reached out again, but this time she didn't go for her waist or her face. She took Alexandra's hand. Just that. Fingers sliding into fingers. Warm, steady, real. We don't have to label this, Lark said, but don't pretend it didn't happen. Alexandra looked at their hands at the quiet certainty of Lark's grip. What happens now? She asked. Whatever you're brave enough to let happen. And somehow that was exactly what Alexandra needed to hear. No demands, no expectations, just possibility. They didn't kiss again. Not that night. But Lark stayed. They talked softly, deeply long into the night. About music, about loneliness, about childhoods that never felt like home. And when Alexandra finally fell asleep, it was on the couch beside Lark, fully clothed. Her head tilted just barely toward the other woman's shoulder. The world outside kept spinning. Her empire kept looming. But for one night, Alexandra Sterling stopped being the lonely billionaire and started being just Alexandra seen. And maybe for the first time in her life safe. Morning sunlight poured through the windows like warm silk across marble. Alexandra opened her eyes slowly, blinking into the unfamiliar softness of her own living room at dawn. Her body had, not from exhaustion, but from stillness, from the unfamiliar act of resting. Real rest, the kind that came not from solitude, but from safety. Lark was still there, asleep, curled lightly on the opposite side of the couch, one hand resting near Alexandra's knee, their bodies not touching, but close enough that the warmth lingered. Alexandra didn't move. She just watched her, studied the gentle rhythm of her breath, the way her lashes fluttered, the way her lips were slightly parted as if mid-dream. For a woman who claimed not to belong anywhere, Lark looked strangely at home here in her space. Alexandra had spent years cultivating silence, control, and vulnerability. And yet, here was this woman breaking every rule she'd ever lived by just by being still, present, and so unafraid. Alexandra didn't know how long she stayed like that, just watching. But when Lark stirred, her eyes opened slowly and met hers with no surprise, no alarm, just calm awareness. Good morning, Lark said, voice husky with sleep. Did you watch me all night? Just now, Alexandra replied. You sleep like someone who doesn't run from anything. Maybe I'm just tired of running. Alexandra looked away. Must be nice. You could try it sometime. Lark sat up, stretching her arms above her head with a sleepy grace that made Alexandra's chest tighten. You don't have to carry everything all the time, you know. I don't know how to let go. Then I can teach you. Alexandra exhaled sharply, almost laughing. What makes you think I want to be taught? Because you let me stay. That landed harder than Alexandra expected. She stood, trying to shake the weight of the moment. Coffee. Only if you're drinking it, too. I usually take it alone. Not today. And just like that, Alexandra found herself in her own kitchen, a space she rarely entered herself, brewing coffee for someone she'd met only days ago, and yet who made everything feel unsettlingly real. Lark leaned against the counter, watching her. You always look like you're ready to fight someone, she said with a small smile. It's how I survived. But is it how you want to live? Alexandra paused. Her hand hovered over the coffee scoop. No answer came. Lark didn't press. She just waited like always. And Alexandra hated how much she needed that. The stillness, the patience, the way Lark didn't flinch when Alexandra didn't know what to say. She handed her a mug in silence. Lark took it with both hands, sipped, and sighed. Perfect. It's just coffee. No, Lark corrected. It's a gesture, and you don't do those lightly. Alexandra sat across from her at the small breakfast table, a place she'd never actually used. Why are you here? Because I want to be. Why, really? Lark met her eyes. Because when I look at you, I see someone who doesn't know how to ask for comfort, but craves it like air. Alexandra's fingers tightened around her mug. You shouldn't say things like that. Why not? Because they make me feel good. No, not good. Messy. Lark leaned in, voice lower now. Alexandra, what if messy is the beginning of free? And that nearly broke her because it wasn't a seduction. It wasn't manipulation. It was a simple, terrifying truth. Alexandra looked at her hands. I don't want to need anyone. You already do. That should scare you. It doesn't. Why not? Because I'm not afraid of being needed. I'm afraid of being invisible. Alexandra looked up and for the first time saw something flicker behind Lark's calm. A crack, a scar, something old and painful. They weren't so different after all. You're not invisible, Alexandra said quietly. Not to me. The air between them shifted, and Alexandra knew without doubt that she was standing at a ledge now. She could step back, retreat, reinforce the walls. Or she could take one step forward and let this be real. I want to see you again, she said. Tonight. Lark smiled, but it wasn't smug. It was soft, warm, real. Then I'll be here. And Alexandra, for the first time, didn't feel like she was falling. She felt like she was landing. The second time Lark entered Alexandra's home, it was different. Not because the space had changed. The marble floors still gleamed. The fireplace still hummed low in the background, and the city still glittered through glass walls. But Alexandra had changed. She didn't hide behind distance this time. Didn't armor herself with silence or sharp edges. She opened the door with bare feet, loose hair, and no makeup. Vulnerability was stitched into every quiet detail. Lark noticed immediately and softened a response. You look like someone who's finally breathing, she said as she stepped inside. Don't get used to it, Alexandra replied, but her voice held no bite. Just nerves, maybe even hope. Lark followed her into the living room, where two glasses of wine already waited untouched. Alexandra picked one up, handed it to her, and sat down. Not across the room, but beside her. You said you don't do this, Lark murmured. I don't, but you want to. Alexandra didn't answer right away. She took a sip of wine, then set the glass down, fingers tight around the stem. You make it feel like less of a risk and more of a choice. Alexandra looked at her. Exactly. Lark smiled. That's all I want to be. A choice you're not afraid to make. The quiet that followed was heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was charged, waiting. Alexandra turned to her slowly. If I asked you to stay tonight, not for sex, not for escape, but just to be here, would you? Lark nodded without hesitation. Even if I don't know how to be good at this, there's no good. There's just honest. Alexandra exhaled. and something inside her cracked open. She shifted closer, close enough that their knees touched, close enough that she could feel Lark's breath. "I think about you," she confessed, "all the time, even when I tell myself not to. I know it scares me." "Me, too." Alexandra reached out slow, careful, and touched Lark's hand. This time, there was no hesitation. Their fingers laced, held. Alexandra's heart was thawing in her chest, not because she wanted to run, but because for the first time in her adult life, she didn't. "I thought I had everything," she whispered. "Then you came in and made me realize I've been starving. Then let me feed you," Lark said. "Let me love the parts of you you've locked away." Alexandra blinked hard, her throat tightened. "You don't even know me." "I know enough. What if I mess this up?" Lark leaned in, her voice like a secret. "Then we'll figure it out together." And that was it. The moment Alexandra stopped fighting, she kissed Lark again, not with hunger, but with reverence, with need, with the fear and hope tangled together in her chest like live wires. Lark pulled her closer, arms wrapping around her waist, grounding her, studying her. They didn't rush. They didn't need to. Every touch was a question. Every breath was an answer. And when they finally let themselves fall back onto the couch, bodies entwined, mouths tracing skin and silence, Alexandra felt something terrifying and beautiful begin to root itself in her chest. Not lust, not obsession, but tenderness, something she hadn't felt in years. Something she didn't know if she deserved but wanted anyway. Later, with the lights low, and their bodies still tangled in the softness of each other, Alexandra whispered into the dark, "I don't want you to disappear." And Lark replied without hesitation, "Then don't let me." Alexandra held her tighter, and for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like the one holding all the power. She felt like someone worth holding on to. They had slipped into something dangerously close to routine. Alexandra found herself looking forward to evenings more than mornings, counting the hours until Lark would arrive with a crooked smile, a paper bag of pastries or wine, and a story about something absurd she saw on the train. The woman was unpredictable in small, beautiful ways, the kind of chaos Alexandra had never allowed in her life, and yet she craved it now, craved her. That night, Lark was already there when Alexandra came home. She had let herself in with the spare key Alexandra had given her, something so intimate, so unspoken, it felt heavier than a declaration. She was barefoot, cooking pasta in Alexandra's too pristine kitchen, her hair in a loose bun, humming something Alexandra couldn't name. Alexandra froze in the doorway, watching her. Something about the domesticity of it, the normally struck her so hard it hurt. Like her body realized something her mind hadn't caught up to yet. She wanted this. Not just Lark. This. Whatever was growing between them. Lark turned, grinning. "You look like you just saw a ghost. Just trying to figure out how you're making this kitchen look lived in." Maybe it needed to be. Alexandra walked in slowly. "You're staying here a lot." Lark blinked, not defensively, but gently. "Do you want me to stop?" "No." "Then what's the look?" Alexandra hesitated. She walked over, picked up a spoon, stirred the sauce like it might help her find the words. "I'm not used to this." "To what?" "Coming home to someone. Letting them see me tired or quiet or scared." Alexandra glanced at her. Lark didn't flinch. "You're not the only one feeling this, Alexandra, but you're better at it." "That's not true." "Yes, it is. You make everything look easy. Loving someone isn't easy." Alexandra froze. The word slipped out like a match dropped in gasoline. Lark didn't take it back, didn't soften it. She let it hang. Alexandra stared at the pot, hands clenched at her sides. "Don't say that," she whispered. "Why?" "Because I don't know if I can say it back." Lark stepped closer. "Not to touch, just to be there." "I didn't say it for a reply. I said it because it's the truth. Mine." Alexandra closed her eyes. "This feels like falling." "Then let yourself fall. And if I hit the ground, I'll be there." Alexandra opened her eyes. That's what terrifies me. Being caught needing to be. The air was thick with everything unsaid. The sauce began to boil behind them. Neither moved. Maybe I should stay at my place tonight, Lark said softly, not angry, just aware. Alexandra's heart clenched. Is that what you want? It's not what I want. It's what I think you need. Distance space to figure out if this is something you're choosing or just letting happen. Alexandra hated how much sense it made. She wanted to scream stay, but she couldn't. Not when her chest was tight with panic she didn't know how to name. Okay, she said, barely audible. Lark nodded, eyes warm. Even now, you know where to find me. And she kissed Alexandra's cheek. Not lips, not this time. And walked out with a quiet grace that shattered something in the silence she left behind. The pasta boiled. The apartment smelled like garlic and rosemaria and memory. Alexandra stood in the middle of it all, staring at the door. Alone, not because Lark had left, but because she had let her go. The apartment was too quiet without Lark. Alexandra had never noticed how loud the silence could be. She moved through the rooms like a stranger in her own life. Everything in its place. Everything perfectly curated, and yet nothing felt alive. Her bed felt colder. Her kitchen untouched. Her playlist sterile. She had spent years building a life where no one could hurt her. And in doing so, she had unknowingly built a life where no one could touch her either until Lark. And now that she was gone, Alexandra realized what she'd really let walk out the door. Softness, laughter, possibility. The absence was unbearable. That night, Alexandra tried to distract herself. She poured a glass of wine, scrolled through emails, reviewed contract clauses she didn't care about. But every time her eyes drifted, they landed somewhere Lark had been. The arm of the couch where she used to curl up. The windowsill where she once stood barefoot, watching the rain. It wasn't just longing. It was grief. Grief for something she'd almost had but hadn't been brave enough to hold on to. By midnight, Alexandra stood in the middle of the living room, the same one where they'd kissed for the first time, and whispered to the empty air, "Come back." But Lark wasn't someone who came back when called. She was someone you went after, and Alexandra had never gone after anything without a guarantee. The next day passed in a blur of meetings and unread messages. Her assistant noticed her silence. Her board noticed her distraction, but no one asked. No one ever did because Alexandra Sterling didn't feel. Except she did now. That night she walked past cafes, bookstores, side streets she hadn't stepped into since childhood. Looking, not knowing where Lark lived, but hoping her feet would remember what her pride refused to admit. 2 hours later, she found herself in front of a weathered building with ivy crawling up the bricks. She had seen Lark glance toward it once when they passed it, saying nothing but smiling like it meant something. Alexandra stood on the sidewalk, heart pounding. She didn't know what she would say. What she could say, that would be enough. But she went in anyway. A few knocks, a long pause. Then the door opened. Lark stood there in a loose sweatshirt and leggings, barefoot, surprised, but not shocked. Alexandra. Her name came out like a breath. Alexandra looked at her. No pretense, no defense, just truth. "I'm sorry," Lark didn't speak. She waited. "I got scared," Alexandra said. "It's not an excuse, but it's the truth. I haven't let anyone in like that in years, maybe ever." "I know," Lark said softly, "and I didn't want to ruin it by not being enough or needing too much or failing." "You didn't ruin anything." Alexandra stepped closer. "I've never felt anything like what I feel when I'm with you, and that terrifies me. But losing you terrifies me more." Lark's eyes softened. She still didn't move. "What do you want from me, Alexandra?" The question landed like a test. And for the first time, Alexandra didn't avoid the answer. "I want the quiet mornings, the chaos in my kitchen. I want the way you touch me like I'm not made of armor. I want you." The air held. Then Lark opened the door wider. "Then come in." Alexandra stepped inside. The door closed behind her and suddenly the world felt like it had weight again. But the kind you wanted to carry. Alexandra didn't sleep that night, not because she couldn't, but because she didn't want to miss a second. Lark had fallen asleep beside her on the small couch, legs tangled with hers, a blanket draped carelessly across them both, their bodies pressed together like puzzle pieces that had been waiting to fit. Alexandra lay there in the quiet dark, heart steady for the first time in days, staring at the ceiling as Lark's breath warmed her shoulder. There was no panic this time, no fear, just something slow and calm and terrifying in a different way. The weight of knowing she finally wanted to belong to someone. Morning came like honey through the blinds. Alexandra woke first again, but this time she didn't move. She just watched Lark sleep for a few minutes, memorizing the shape of peace on her face. When Lark stirred, she turned toward her with a sleepy smile and whispered, "You stayed. You let me." Alexandra whispered back. Lark reached up, brushing a piece of hair from her face. "Are we okay?" "We're more than okay." And Alexandra meant it. She wasn't good at saying those things, but when she looked at Lark now, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could learn. They spent the rest of the morning like two people who had already chosen each other. Alexandra made coffee while Lark sat on the counter swinging her legs. They laughed. They argued about toast. They kissed between sips of coffee. Everything felt easy. Not perfect, but real. Later, curled together in bed, Lark turned to her. "What does love feel like for you?" Alexandra blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, is it heavy? Is it soft? Does it scare you or hold you? Or both?" Alexandra let out a breath. "It feels like standing at the edge of something high and not being afraid to jump." Lark smiled. "That sounds like trust." "Maybe it is. And have you ever felt that before?" Alexandra looked at her, really looked. "Not until you." The words weren't grand or rehearsed, but they were true and Lark heard their weight. "Do you want this?" Lark asked. "Not just me. This the messy mornings, the figuring it out, the showing up even when it's hard." Alexandra didn't hesitate. "Yes." Lark nodded slowly. "Then we do it together. No hiding, no shutting down, no pretending we're not scared." "I can do that," Alexandra said. "Even when you want to run. Especially then." "Good," Lark said, "because I want to build something with you." And just like that, the air shifted again, not in intent but in depth. They weren't falling anymore. They were building, brick by brick, fear by fear. That night, back at Alexandra's place, Lark left a toothbrush in the guest bath, a book on the nightstand, a sweater in the closet, no declarations, no ceremony, just quiet signs of a woman slowly, surely becoming home. It was the small things that unsettled her, not the nights, not the kisses, not the murmured promises half asleep, those she could handle, even savor. What shook her was the toothbrush, the sweater, the dog-eared book by her bed, the sound of someone else's shower in the morning, the way her closet no longer closed quite the same because pieces of Lark's life were beginning to live there. It wasn't loss of space that scared her. It was the presence of permanence and the echo of a question she had never been brave enough to ask. "What if I lose this?" Lark didn't demand anything. She moved through Alexandra's world with grace and gentleness, always checking in, always asking, "Is this okay?" before letting another part of herself slip into Alexandra's life. But Alexandra knew that letting someone stay wasn't just about saying yes. It was about believing they wouldn't leave. One night, they had dinner on the balcony. The sky was clear. The air was still. Alexandra had just opened a bottle of wine when Lark leaned forward, eyes soft but direct. "Are you happy?" Alexandra didn't answer immediately. She looked out at the skyline. The buildings she once believed were her only companions. "Yes," she said at last, "but I'm afraid of how much it matters." "Me, too," Lark said, "but I think that's what makes it real. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, and if it doesn't, then I'll ruin it." Lark reached for her hand. You don't have to protect yourself from me. I don't know how not to. Then let me show you. Alexandra looked down at their joined hands. What if I need too much? Then I'll give more. And what if I can't give enough? Then I'll remind you that love isn't measured like that. Alexandra's throat tightened. You make me want to believe in things I've spent years avoiding. Then let them find you, Lark whispered. Let me find you. Later that night, Alexandra woke up from a dream she couldn't remember, heart racing, breath uneven. Lark stirred beside her immediately. Hey, she said, reaching for her. You're safe. I'm here. Alexandra didn't speak, just buried her face in Lark's neck, arms wrapping around her like she was afraid she'd vanish. Lark didn't ask questions. She just held her firm, steady, real. In the morning, Alexandra found a note tucked under her coffee cup. Lark's handwriting, rushed and soft. Loving you isn't hard. Loving you is like breathing. You just have to stop holding it in. Alexandra read it 3 times, then folded it gently and placed it in the drawer next to her bed, beside a ring she no longer wore and a photo she hadn't looked at in years. Lark wasn't replacing her past. She was rewriting Alexandra's future. And Alexandra, for once, wasn't fighting it. The love didn't fade. It deepened quietly like roots beneath the surface. Day by day, touch by touch, moment by moment, Alexandra found herself becoming someone new. Not someone weaker, someone braver. She no longer looked over her shoulder when Lark laughed too loudly in her home. No longer winced when her shirt was folded and placed in the same drawer as hers. No longer asked when she was leaving because now Lark didn't leave. She stayed. She cooked. She slept. She cried. She kissed. And Alexandra let her. But love, when real, doesn't stay small. It grows until it touches everything. Even the corners you tried to hide, especially those. And Alexandra, despite everything, still had corners. It started with a drawer, a locked one. Lark had never asked about it, never tried to open it. But one evening while searching for a pen, she accidentally pulled the wrong handle, and it didn't open. Just a small click, a resistance, and Alexandra's voice, sharp and immediate. Don't. Lark froze. I wasn't trying to. I know. Alexandra stood in the hallway, tense, her eyes unreadable. Just don't. Lark nodded slowly. Okay. But something shifted after that. Not in Lark. She kept moving with the same soft steadiness. But in Alexandra, she became quieter, more withdrawn. She still held Lark's hand when they watched movies. Still kissed her good morning. But something behind her eyes had shuddered again. And Lark, patient but not blind, began to feel it. 3 days passed before she brought it up. They were sitting on the balcony again, wrapped in a blanket, drinking tea. The city was quiet. What's in the drawer? Lark asked gently. Alexandra didn't answer, just stared at the skyline. You don't have to tell me. Lark added quickly. But I think it's telling that the only locked thing in this house is something you keep next to your bed. It's nothing. It's not. Silence stretched between them. Then Alexandra spoke. Letters from someone who left. Lark blinked. An ex, no, my brother. Her voice was tight, controlled. He died 5 years ago. He was the only person who ever really knew me. The only one who saw me before I became this. Alexandra, it's not just letters, she continued. It's everything I never said back. Every regret. Every time I thought about calling him and didn't. She exhaled slowly. And I'm afraid that if I open that drawer and you're here, it'll mean I've let go of him. And I don't know if I'm ready for that. Lark was quiet for a moment. Then she said, keeping him doesn't mean losing me, and letting me in doesn't mean erasing him. Alexandra looked at her, eyes rimmed with unshed tears. I don't know how to carry both. Maybe you don't have to carry alone anymore. Alexandra set her cup down. Her hands were shaking. I've never said any of this out loud. You don't have to say it perfectly. Just honestly. That night, Alexandra opened the drawer. Not alone. Lark sat beside her on the floor, cross-legged, silent. Alexandra pulled out the letters one by one. Old, creased, some torn at the edges. She didn't read them aloud. She didn't need to. She just held them, her fingers trembling, her breath shaky. Lark placed a hand on her back, anchoring her, saying nothing. And when Alexandra finally whispered, "I miss him," Lark whispered back, "I know." That was the moment something inside Alexandra broke open. Not in a destructive way, in a way that made space. They sat there for a long time. No tears, just truth. When they finally stood, Alexandra tucked the letters back in gently, but left the drawer unlocked. Not open, but unlocked. In the days that followed, everything between them felt deeper, the laughter more tender, the silences more comfortable. Alexandra no longer needed to explain herself. Lark knew her rhythms now. She knew the quiet days, the overthinking, the way Alexandra's hand would twitch before she reached for her. She knew not to fill every silence, to let some wounds breathe. And Alexandra, she began to leave space for Lark, not just in her home, in her plans, in her thoughts, in her future. She stopped calling it temporary in her head. She started calling it the life they were building. One night while brushing her teeth, Alexandra glanced into the mirror and saw Lark standing behind her, hair messy, skin flushed from laughter, wearing her robe like it had always belonged to her. Alexandra looked at her reflection and whispered, "I don't know how I lived before you." Lark stepped forward, wrapped her arms around her from behind, and whispered back, "You survived. Now you're living." And Alexandra believed it. There was a moment just after midnight when Alexandra realized she wasn't afraid anymore. Not of the quiet, not of the closeness, not even of the way Lark breathed beside her in bed. Fully asleep, one arm resting loosely across her waist like she had every right to be there. Because she did. She had earned that space. Not through force, not through insistence, but through patience, through honesty. Through the way she never tried to fix Alexandra, only to know her. The realization didn't come with fireworks. It came softly like rain after weeks of drought. Alexandra lay there in the dark, her hand gently tracing the lines of Lark's spine beneath the thin fabric of her shirt, and thought, this is what it feels like to choose someone. Not to fall, not to be swept, but to choose every day, every hour, even in silence. Especially in silence. She pressed a kiss to Lark's shoulder. "I love you," she whispered, not waiting for the right moment, not needing to hear it back, just saying it because it lived in her now. Lark stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open. Alexandra smiled. "Go back to sleep." But Lark blinked, awake now, shifting to face her in the dark. "Did you say something?" Alexandra hesitated, then steady. "I said I love you." Silence. Then Lark with a sleepy smile and voice still heavy with dreams. "Of course you do." Alexandra laughed surprised. "That's your reaction?" Lark brushed a thumb across Alexandra's cheek. "You've been loving me for a while now. You were just waiting for permission to admit it. And who gave me that permission? You did." Alexandra's heart clenched in the best way. She kissed Lark then, slow, unhurried, like everything in her body knew this woman, this moment, this life. The next morning, they woke up tangled and warm, sun spilling over their bodies like silk. Alexandra made breakfast without burning it. Lark danced barefoot in the kitchen. They kissed over coffee, argued about how much sugar belonged in tea, and curled up on the couch with an old book and a blanket they now shared without thinking. Later, while Lark napped in the living room, Alexandra sat at her desk, the one she hadn't touched in weeks, and opened a blank page. She started to write not a contract, not a strategy, but a letter to herself, to the woman she used to be. She wrote about loneliness, about silence, about how long she had mistaken control for safety. She wrote about the first night Lark touched her, the first time she said yes, the first time she stayed. She wrote about what it meant to be soft and still be whole, about how love didn't make her weaker. It made her more herself. She didn't cry. Not this time. She just wrote. And when she was done, she printed it, folded it, and placed it inside the unlocked drawer next to the letters from her brother. She whispered, "Thank you," and closed it gently. That night, Alexandra invited Lark to a quiet dinner in the garden behind her building, a space no one knew existed but her. They sat beneath a canopy of soft lights and climbing roses. No staff, no noise, just them. Alexandra reached across the table, took Lark's hand, and said, "I want you to stay." Lark tilted her head. "I already do. No, I mean all the way. Not just your books and sweaters. Your life. I want this to be your home." Lark's eyes glistened. "You're serious." "I've never been more." Lark leaned in, kissed her hand, and whispered, "Then I'm yours." And Alexandra, for the first time, didn't flinch at the word. She smiled, open, full, and completely unafraid. The house no longer felt like a fortress. It felt like a home. The walls that once echoed with silence now pulsed with laughter, the clinking of cups, the rustle of turned pages, and the soft rhythm of bare feet across hardwood floors. Alexandra had spent most of her life believing that love was a risk she couldn't afford. Something volatile, unstable, something that would ask too much of her and give too little back. But Lark had changed that. Not through grand gestures, not through declarations shouted across storms, but through presence. It was in the way she stayed even in the quiet. In the way she touched Alexandra not as though she were fragile, but as though she were sacred. In the way she listened, not to what was spoken, but to the things tucked beneath every word Alexandra had never learned to say. It had been 6 weeks since the night in the garden, 6 weeks since Alexandra said, "I want you to stay," and meant not for a night or a season, but for everything. Lark had fully moved in now. Her books lined the shelves. Her plants crowded the windowsills. Her laughter threaded through the mornings. And her hand always found Alexandra's in the stillest moments, in the car, in bed, in the market line. Love had eased into the cadence of everyday life. It didn't blaze anymore. It glowed. One evening, Alexandra came home late, drained by meetings and negotiations, to find the lights low, soft jazz playing, and Lark standing in the living room holding two glasses of wine. "You look like you need a moment," Lark said, stepping forward, offering one. Alexandra took it. Their fingers brushed. "I need more than a moment," she murmured. Lark smiled. "Then take the whole night." Alexandra set the glass down. "Can I ask you something? Anything? That first night, when you found me watching the dancers, why me?" Lark's eyes gentled. "Because you looked like a woman who had given everything to the world and never let it touch you. And what did you think you could give me? A first dance?" Alexandra exhaled slowly. "You did." Lark stepped closer, her voice low and full of something steady. "You never asked me to dance again." Alexandra tilted her head. "Would you say yes? Every time?" Alexandra took her hand. No music played. No guests watched. But in the middle of their own living room, they began to sway slow barefoot. No choreography, just presence, just breath, just the soft sound of their hearts finding rhythm. Lark rested her head against Alexandra's shoulder. "You still scared?" she whispered. "Yes," Alexandra replied. "But I'm not running." Good. They didn't need music. The memory of it was enough. The night blurred around them. The city outside their windows kept living. But inside that room, time bent around the miracle of two women who had almost missed each other and didn't. Later, curled up on the couch, Lark played with Alexandra's fingers and said, "You know what we should do." "What?" "Leave the city for a while. Just us. Somewhere with green. Somewhere quiet." "You hate quiet," Alexandra teased. "Not with you." Alexandra nodded. "We could go tomorrow." Lark blinked. "Seriously? I have a driver. A house upstate. No schedule. We could leave tonight if you want. You do that for you? Alexandra smiled. Yes. The next day they drove north. Windows down. Hair tangled. No suits. No deadlines. Just them. The house in the countryside was old, wrapped in vines, full of sunlight and creaking wood. Alexandra had never brought anyone there. She hadn't even been herself in years. But the moment Lark stepped through the front door, she turned and said, "This feels like a place where people fall in love again." "We haven't stopped," Alexandra replied. They stayed a week, walked barefoot through grass, swam in the lake behind the trees, cooked, burned things, laughed, fell asleep tangled on the porch couch with books open on their chests. They built rituals, morning coffee on the steps, afternoon naps in the sun, long baths and longer kisses. Every day, Alexandra said, "I love you." Every time. Lark answered, "I know." And one night while lying in bed with the windows open and rain tapping gently on the glass, Alexandra turned to Lark and said, "You changed my life." Lark looked at her serious, unblinking. "You let me." Alexandra cubed her face. "You made me soft without breaking me." "You were always soft," Lark whispered. "You just forgot. And now you remember." Alexandra kissed her slowly, reverently, like a woman who no longer feared the quiet, who no longer waited for the fall because she had fallen fully, entirely, and landed in arms that caught her. The morning after, Alexandra woke to find Lark dancing barefoot in the kitchen. No music playing, just movement, light, joy. Alexandra stood in the doorway, silent, watching, remembering that night so long ago, watching everyone else dance. How she'd stayed still, locked in a world that didn't know her, until a woman had whispered, "You deserve a first dance, too." And now she was here, not watching from the shadows, not waiting to be invited dancing. If you enjoyed this, you can support the channel by tapping the thanks button, the heart with the $sign. With super thanks, you can make a direct contribution that helps me keep creating more videos for you.